Greetings, fellow Gothamites and all the ships at sea. Introductions all around. I am Edward Joseph Delaney, the creator of The Outworlder. I thought I'd take a few moments to explain to you where the whole story came from. Like many writers, I was a reader first. Plenty of comic book superheroes, science fiction, fantasy, spy thrillers, political commentary, sort of thing. By the time I was 16, just reading was not enough. I wanted to be one of those who could take other creative people on a mental voyage. I started writing my own science fiction. Plenty of slam bang action, but not enough of a real story that made readers want to experience it over and over again. See, when you're 16 years old, you might have worked plenty, but you don't have much in the way of relatable experience. And like many people, I had gotten out of high school and went to college. A few semesters at Ohio State and Kent State, and I was feeling like I was learning nothing. I mean, I was not doing anything useful at all. So I tell my dad I'm going nowhere in a state college. And like any parent, he asks, "What are you going to do with your life?" So that's when I come out with some brochures from the United States Army. And my dad understands completely. What happened was my grandpa was in World War I. My great-uncle was in World War II. My father was in Germany during the Berlin airlift, and here I was coming to Germany for the final years of the Cold War. Fact is, we Delaneys find our moment in history over in Europe and during military service. Not that we talk about it very much, it's the job. Now, what you understand is that in the Army, you do a lot of training. And for days and nights, I have been dug in a foxhole overlooking the Fulda Gap. It's early 1988 and I'm freezing. And I'm looking across the East-West German border with my M60 right next to me. And one night I'm wondering why anyone would live in a hole in the ground. You remember all those training films they showed you about living in a subterranean bomb shelter. Not just for days or weeks, but for entire months. Entire months beneath the ground. But I'm a science fiction writer, so I'm wondering, okay, beyond months, what happens if people stayed underneath the ground for generations, for centuries? How would they evolve or devolve while they're down there? What would they do to get out? How far would they go? So you might say that the entire idea for the underground city-state of Debal began on a winter night in a German foxhole. Now I'm staring across the Fulda Gap at East German and Russian soldiers, and this whole story is busting open in my head. So it's a small wonder I never fall asleep on duty with my synapses snapping and snapping and snapping for days and nights on end. I mean, you're running on a kind of mental adrenaline that few people can tell you about who haven't experienced it themselves. So I finally get out of the field. And in my off time, I put my ideas down on paper. Now, the problem is the first draft of Outworlder is over 280 pages long. Now, you think about that. If you go for a minute per page at 280 pages long, you have to wonder how many people can sit through a 4-hour and 40-minute long movie. So I have to make like a surgeon and cut it down 18 times. Over many, many years. Now you think about this. What was 280 plus pages was cut down to less than 90. So the product you're about to see is still 132 minutes long, made from just a screenplay that's less than 90 pages. Now remember when I finished it, back in 1988, plenty of people told me to just turn Outworlder over to Hollywood. Just give it up. Just sell out right away. It's a great piece of work. Look great on the screen. You can make a lot of money really fast. But you hear the stories about how things get screwed up. And I'm listening to all these people say, turn it over, give it up. And I listened to the one person who told me not to. And I'm glad I listened to her. So what I should tell you about my backstory is that from ages 16 to 44, I wasted 28 years writing screenplays, short stories, stage plays, TV pilots, all sorts of things. And here I was entering literary contests and sending out query letters trying to get the attentions of agents and publishers. Lots of writing samples sent out, lots of rejection letters, and what my plan had been was to sell off other screenplays, other novels, other short stories, other stage plays that I had written, and then use that money to make an independent film version of Outworlder. Well, I've thrown away more rejection letters and a plethora of scripts than you could believe. In fact, there are probably birds raiding landfills and feathering their nests with all that waste paper that I threw away. That's the value of hard work in feudal corporate America. Fact is, dialogue with agents is very rare. And if you're not willing to let Hollywood dumb down and compromise your work, you are not going to get representation. You are not going to get production, and you're not going to get publication. You're just out. Integrity doesn't work there. See, what I realized was that I was born decades too late. If I'd been writing in the 40s and 50s, I might have done well. But I cannot succeed in the system that exists now. I cannot write the formulaic stuff at all. You can ask any science teacher I had back in grade school how many things got blown up because I cannot mix formulas well at all. Really. I'm not a formula guy, so you Hollywood types are not going to like me, and I don't need for you to. I'm not good with technical manuals either. I try to read those things, and the text jumps off the page right into my face and whites out my frontal lobe with sensory overload. So I'm not very good with the technical stuff either. Nor am I a people person. I'm a creator. So I really, based on that, I really don't think there's ever going to be a $200 million motion picture made by a corporate studio here in America. No flamboyant director is going to put rubber nipples on my characters. No hack writer who still has the wet ink on his BFA is going to rewrite my script to suit some agenda. And the marketing division is not going to have story or directorial input. And no kid is going to get unhealthy eating junk food with an Outworlder label on it. No. You're supposed to eat your food in proper proportions whenever possible and plan to live a long and productive life. Now, I thought for quite some time about animating Outworlder myself. This was really in my mind for a long time. What I was thinking was, I pulled out a calculator, did the math. And what I was thinking was it takes 24 drawings to make one moving minute. It takes 1,440 drawings to make a minute. It was 24 drawings a second, 1,440 per minute, and the piece you're about to look at is 132 minutes long. Now, what that comes out to, if I had drawn the thing out, would be 190,080 drawings to make a full animated Outworlder. Now, I just don't have that much life left in me to animate 132 minutes of footage. And since, like I said, I'm not good at the technical stuff, I couldn't learn CGI either. I tried to buy Lightwave 8. I bought plenty of manuals. I got them lined up down here, trying to learn Lightwave 8, trying to figure out CGI, and I just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. So what I ended up doing is going for a graphic novel approach. Another problem I have is when I try to draw graphic novels, I'm also not good at putting the dialogue balloons into the graphic novel so that it doesn't obscure all the artwork, because as you'll notice, my characters are kind of wordy. So I take a different approach. What you have now is 460 drawings in a talking graphic novel. And what I had to do was most of the voices myself. Now others were done with text-to-speech software. And but as you'll hear, many of the text-to-speech software voices did not record very well. I recorded the voices on a 1984 Sanyo tape recorder that I bought before I left for OSU back in '84. Now you got to realize, at this point, that machine is 29 years old, but it's analog tech, so I can use it fairly well. I'd like to be proficient at the digital stuff, but unfortunately, I'm not a 21st century guy. I just don't have the digital thing down. The manuals and the menus are very complicated, and it's hard to remember the correct sequence to do everything in to get the results you want to achieve. Now, I had a bit of difficulty with some software issues, trying to figure out how I'm going to make my Sony Handycam connect to my Apple computer. So what I did was I went to Mac headquarters, and they found me this program called Toast 11. It's made by a firm called Roxio, and it seemed to link the camcorder to the Apple computer pretty well. Now, if you need any tech support, what you want to do is call up Mac headquarters at 314-647-6647. They are some very good people there, very good people. And they know how to work with a guy like me who's trying to succeed in a time he just doesn't belong in. Now, while you're working at writing your own product, what you do is you cast a wide net as far as reading and viewing influences. Now, since I was in single digits, I had been watching the creations of Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry on television. And when I finally learned to read, that was a great day. When I learned to read, I was not interested in the kid books that they were giving us in school. No, I was more interested in the historical and the political commentary my father was reading. See, my father was one of those guys that carried Machiavelli's The Prince in his attaché case everywhere he went. Of course, that kind of material is way over the head of a 5 or a 6-year-old. So I remember the first, one of the first books I ever read was a 1971 Batman comic that had been written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Neil Adams. Two fantastic men that are still in the practice today. Magnificent work they turn out, really. And I think one of the best things your mom can do when you're a kid is get you a library card. Absolutely. At that library is where you meet the works of Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, Robert A. Heinlein, Philip K. Dick, many, many others. And later on, you start frequenting comic book conventions and comic book stores where you pick up the works of Stan Lee and Bob Kane, Siegel and Schuster. Think about it. The whole golden age started with Siegel and Schuster. Now, back in the 70s and early 80s, back issues of comics were a lot cheaper. And later on, as I moved through the 80s, I began discovering the works of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Frank Miller, John Byrne, Todd McFarlane, Warren Ellis, Grant Morrison. But no matter how much I practice, no matter how much effort I put in, I will never be the artist that Jim Lee is. That kind of talent is more genetic than practice. That is magnificent talent. Absolutely. Another problem is I got beginning arthritis. So sometimes I accidentally crush my pencil in my hand, which is terribly annoying. But fortunately, Blick's Art Materials is open 7 days a week. Now, those of you that have been reading comics for the longest time, you know that many of the long-lasting comic book characters are very idealistic. They have this moral conviction wherein they will not kill their villain. But those of you who've served in the military or as first responders know that not every villain can be contained. They will escape again, and they will fill many graveyards full of innocent victims. Now, where does your idealism work then when you've let innocent people die? People die just because you don't want to get your hands dirty or you don't want to make the hard, fast decisions. Now, my Outworlder character is a military man. He's a realist. He's practical in many ways. He knows you cannot leave a villain alive to strike down villains again. As such, you're not going to see the same villains in this first movie you're not going to see in the sequels. No, Outworlder strikes his villain down hard, takes him down screaming. And then it's time for the society to heal. Time for those people to come together, discuss options, and vote on the best course of action. And while they're doing that, the Outworlder just disappears onto his next mission. He doesn't stand around to make speeches. He's a man of action. He leads by example, not by the spoken word. Now, I finished filming Outworlder in May of 2013. And I'm working through some technical issues. And one of them is music. See, I'm not a music man. I just don't have that gift. I bought a Yamaha keyboard in 1998. I've been working on and off for 15 years trying to make music. And I can't do it. It's like listening to somebody hunt and peck on a typewriter that has tones. It just sounds awful. I occasionally get a few chords in there that sound like something, but they never lead anywhere. It doesn't constitute as music. Not real heartfelt music. So instead of releasing Outworlder with a really bad soundtrack, what I did instead is I released it with no music whatsoever. And I'm hoping that in its present form, Outworlder does not put you to sleep. If I could afford a composer, an orchestra, and sound engineer, then you would be seeing a more complete version of Outworlder with a fantastic soundtrack rivaling anything that you've heard in a James Bond movie or in a Star Trek movie, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, any one of those. I remember I've been collecting music since I had hair on my head. We're talking about a long time here. And like many, one of my first soundtracks was John Williams' masterful soundtrack for Star Wars. Just epic, just incredible soundtrack. And it was not long before I began collecting soundtracks to the James Bond movies, the Star Trek films, and many other action-adventure films. That's the kind of music that I would like to have had for Outworlder, but unfortunately I cannot make that myself. I remember back in the spring of 1982, I saw Star Trek fans jumping out of their chairs while watching Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And you have to wonder what they were seeing and hearing that caused this response. They were seeing two special effects models with optically printed phaser effects and pyrotechnics slug it out over a water tank nebula. And what were they hearing? Well-timed sound effects and the brilliant score of Mr. James Horner. Combine all of this and the effect is people acting like they're at the bleachers at Yankee Stadium. A lot of you might be wondering why I'm not charging money for this talking graphic novel. No, patriots, I'm not a communist. I do not have the budget to mass media advertise this work. So for all I know, perhaps nobody's even seeing this because I cannot afford the services of a mainstream advertising firm. Also, there are places around the globe where people cannot afford $10 to $50 for a graphic novel. Places where media and internet access is minimal. Places where freedom is up against the ropes. Places where the Outworlder is needed. So I don't expect anyone to understand what I'm trying to do here. And I do not require approval or gratitude. It's just a simple matter of I who create something do not ask for permission from those who create nothing to continue to create and to continue to exist. That said, while you're sitting there online enjoying the first Outworlder, I'm going to be drawing the second, and I'm going to be writing the third. This is merely the beginning. Thank you for your time, fellow Gothamites, and good night, Gotham City, wherever you are.